Hello and welcome to episode 151 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet in my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is August 1st, 2022. And today I'm wearing another shawl by Romy Design, Rosemary Hill. And it's one of my favorite shawls. I think most of her shawls are one of my favorite shawls. And this was part of her first ebook with 7 little shawls. That was the first ebook I bought from her, and I think it was basically the first patterns I ever got from her. And I haven't knit all 7 of them. I think I've only knit 2 or 3. I've definitely knit 2. Maybe I've only done 2. I've planned to knit most of the others. Haven't got around to doing that. But anyway, so this is a 2-color shawl. And you start off by knitting the big triangle in 2 color stripes. And then once you finish that, you pick up stitches around the 2 sides of the triangle. And then you use 1 color to knit this lace pattern. And then you use the other color to do a picot bind off. And I think this was the first time I did that. And knitting beads into picking up the stitches was not part of the pattern, but this is something I saw on Ravelry in one of the other projects, and I loved the idea so much that I had to steal the idea. And I love having just those few beads right there in between the lace pattern and the stripe pattern. And the yarn is by Lana Grossa, and the yarn was called hand dye color, I think, something like that. So it's supposed to look hand dyed, but it was machine dyed. And it's a really nice yarn for shawls or maybe even for pullovers. But it's called sock yarn and it doesn't really work for socks. I knit 1 pair of socks out of that yarn, and after I washed the socks, I think 3 times, my son couldn't fit his foot inside anymore. So I think they felt it or something. They were supposed to be machine washable, but it just didn't work with the hardware that socks get and washing them regularly. It just didn't work. With a shawl that's knit loosely and it doesn't get any hardware and you don't wash it like every week, that's a lot better. So I love the yarn for shawls, just don't use it for socks. Yeah, so that's the shawl I'm wearing today. Did I say what it's called? Taygete, I think is how you pronounce it. And it's out of her first ebook, 7 Small Shawls. And I think the color goes really nicely with this little cotton top that I'm wearing. This is a pattern out of a Japanese knitting and crochet book. It was the first Japanese knitting and crochet book that I bought in Germany, not the first one that I bought in Japan. And all I did is crochet 8 squares. They're all the same pattern. And then I think I even crocheted them together, so there was no sewing to do. I crocheted them together at the sides and I crocheted a bit of the squares together on the shoulder. And in the pattern book, you're supposed to crochet little sleeves, and you could also crochet an edge at the lower. You could crochet some more on the lower edge. I didn't do that because I thought the size of the top with these 4 squares is just perfect. And having 2 squares that you either sew or crochet together on the sides and on the tops is one of my favorite ways of making little summer tops that are just easy to throw over whatever. So that's something I really like to do. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. I will put the shawl on, but maybe I'll get rid of it during the video if it gets too warm. But for now, it's okay. So that's what I'm wearing. Then on to finished objects. I have 2 finished objects. They're both rather small, and you only know one of them so far because the other one is one of my new cast-ons as well. So I have 2 new cast-ons this week and 2 finished objects. And one of the finished objects was also a new project. But the project that you do know are these little tiny wrist warmers that I knit out of Hobby 8-ply sock yarn. I got the yarn from Hobby to do a sort of promotion video. I did that a few weeks ago if you want to have a look. And I ordered 3 colors of that sock yarn so I could try out some color work, and that really worked out very nicely. The pattern is out of a book called Socks Book Family and Friends, and though the title sounds English, it's a German book. I'm not sure whether it's been translated into English, but there are several socks books published in German by Stine and Stitch is what her that's the name she uses to publish patterns. And the first 2 books was all about colorwork socks, and then book 3 and 4 she included more different patterns like hats and scarves and pullovers. And I think with the 4th book she also includes lace patterns and cables and things like that. But I really like her colorwork patterns. They are usually not very difficult, but very effective, very beautiful. And so this pattern is part of a sock pattern. And in the sock, it's repeated twice. But I thought I'll just do these tiny little wrist warmers just to try out the yarn. And I'm really happy with it. So once winter comes around and it gets cold in my shop again, I can wear them. And the other finished object, you will probably guess, has to be my July gnome, because I hadn't knit a gnome in July yet. And as I am taking part in Sierra Shawl's Year of Gnomes, I'm trying to knit a gnome every month. So I was running late last month and I wanted to start and finish a gnome within the month of July. So I decided to knit the tiniest gnome that she has so far designed. And that's one of the No Fun Like Gnome Fun patterns. And it's Little Niblet. A niblet is so tiny that you have to embroider the beard and the nose. And because I want to wear it as an earring, I certainly had to do a second one. And so these are my 2 new niblets. I knit a pair of niblets before several years ago. Is it several years ago? 1 or 2 years ago? I don't know. But on Instagram, I posted all 4 of them together. So if you want to have a look at that. And maybe you may have recognized that the colors that I used for these little earrings are the colors that I'm using for the gnome pullover I'm knitting at the moment. And of course the same colors that I use for the hat. So I'll have a complete outfit with hat, earrings and a pullover once I'm done with the pullover. So these are my July gnomes and my second finished object. Okay, on to works in progress. As usual, I'll start with the socks. And I am knitting the Catharine Macaulay socks as part of our pattern battle in the Opal abo or subscription group. And last week I had almost finished increasing for the heel. And I not only finished the increases, I finished the complete heel. So this is what the heel looks like from the back. You do this, what's it called? That's the heel turn, I think, is when you knit back and forth. And then once you finish with that, you can start knitting the pattern on the back and on the front. And I put the second sock on a sock blocker so you can see what the sock looks like. So I started at the toe. This is the heel that she describes in her book. And it fits really nicely. And now this is how far I knit. I still haven't made up my mind how long I want the socks to be and if I want them knee high or if I want to start the ribbing fairly soon. So I'm still thinking about that. Haven't made up my mind. By the way, I keep forgetting to mention that these needles and the stitch marker goes so perfectly with the yarn. So the color of the needles is the same color as those stripes in the yarn. And then I picked a stitch marker to go with the blue in the yarn, and then the black cable is sort of corresponds with the gray in the yarn. So I feel like I have all the colors in the yarn in my materials that I'm using for knitting. I enjoy that. So that's the first pair of socks. Then the second pair of socks I'm knitting on are the film reel socks that I'm knitting for my nephew. And I finished 2 more of those film reels. And I'm really happy with how they look. This sort of almost looks like a landscape, I think. This is a lot darker. Then it's a different pattern here and a different pattern here. And I thought that I was going to knit 3 of those film reels and then do the toe. But yesterday, I asked my husband to try the socks on because he has about the same shoe size as my nephew. And I realized that the socks would be too big if I did another one of those. If I do another whole film reel, I have very little space to do the toe. So I stopped knitting and I have to do some thinking to figure out how to finish the socks. I will probably undo the black and white, and I will probably start with the main color and then just knit a bit before I start the decreases or something like that. But I'm not too sure yet, so that's why I stopped knitting here. But I'm happy with the with those different films that I knit into the sock. Really happy with those. Yeah, by the way, this is the yarn I'm using, Opal Africa, and it's really nice to see how these colors come out in these stripes. And then the third pair of socks that I have on my needles are a pair of green socks that I want to donate when I go to the Yarn Festival in Düsseldorf in less than 2 weeks' time. And I finished the first one, and I'm using this spiral pattern. That's I've linked it to a pattern that calls it Estonian spiral pattern, but I also put down the pattern, how to knit the pattern, on the project page because I don't think it's a secret, and it's very simple once you know how to do it. And the interesting thing about this sock is this is no pattern, so you can see what the yarn looks like if you do not have a pattern, and this is the same yarn with the pattern. Really like the difference in the cuff and in the foot of the sock. And it's also funny to see that there are so many stripes on this side and a lot less color on this side of the sock. I started the second sock, but I've only knit this bit so far. So yeah, I have to keep knitting for a bit and then I can add the heel and the rest of the sock. I do want to have it finished next Monday because I want to give it away the following weekend. So I have to show it to you as a finished object next week. So that's the socks. Then on to the garments that I'm knitting out of sock yarn. And I put a bit of knitting into the Gnome pullover that I just mentioned. Not a lot happened. It was quite a bit of work, but it doesn't show a lot because all that happened is that this bit grew a bit, but I still have to add quite a few rounds. I'm not quite sure how long to make the pullover yet. It may be a fairly short one, then I don't have to do too much knitting, but maybe I'll do a long pullover. I just don't know yet. All these decisions can be really difficult. But the next garment is my beautiful rainbow Wolldackel neon cardigan. It's the Party Cardi by Stephanie Lupwin or Telly Bean Knits. And as you can see, I finished the green stripe completely, and I've actually added in the yellow yarn. So for this stripe, 120 gram mini was enough. I have this much left. I'm not quite sure whether that's going to be enough to put 2 rows onto the sleeve because I didn't cast off the sleeves. I want to knit a stripe of every color onto the sleeve. So maybe that's enough for 4 rounds. Maybe it's not. I do have a second mini, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just curious. So on the top of the cardigan, every color has 3 garter ridges, and then somewhere around here the short rows start, and then the stripes get wider and wider. And then from the third stripe on, I am decreasing stitches. So the fronts have this nice curve to them. So basically this is a straight line. So from the way I knit it, it's straight and then it goes up here. But from the way the jacket sort of hangs, it does look as if it was going down here and then going up here. And that's a really nice look, I think. So I'm really looking forward to finishing this and start wearing it. It's too warm at the moment to wear a cardigan, but I just can't wait to see it finished. And as soon as it gets cold, I'm going to wear it all the time. So that's the rainbow cardigan. The next thing I'm going to show you is my second new cast on, and that's definitely not finished yet. Okay, I've got it mixed up. Just a moment, here we go. And this is another commission. I was asked to knit it for a theatre as a part of a costume. So it's for the Westfälische Landestheater. So it's some German theatre. It's not the one here in Wiesbaden, but anyway. And I'm using the yarn Creative Chic Unique by Rico. It's mostly acrylic, some wool and a bit of polyamide. And 200 grams have 310 meters. And I was asked to knit this little, what do you call this? It's like a pullover with no sleeves. Is it a vest? I'm not quite sure whether a vest is supposed to be open like a cardigan or like this, but I'm sure somebody is going to comment and tell me what you call a pullover without sleeves in English. And yeah, so this whole book is about this one yarn, and I was asked to knit this this piece for the theatre, and in exactly those colors. So this is one of the colors, and this is the start of the back. And you may be wondering why I'm not knitting in the round, as I prefer to knit things in the round. But the thing is that they're using the two different colors. One color is for the front and one for the back. I think you can see it on this picture. So these are different colors than these. And I was asked to knit it exactly the way it is in the magazine because they wanted a lot of colors. So that's the reason I'm knitting back and forth. Yeah, so this is going to be the back with those colors. And then I have the second ball. I'll show it to you once I get there for the front. And then I'll have to seam it together and do the ribbings. It's a fairly quick knit. It's a 6mm needle. The gauge is a bit looser than it's called for in the pattern, but I thought usually on stage it's fairly warm. It's usually not cold. So I thought if I knit it a bit more loosely, it'll be less warm. It'll be less dense. And I calculated the number of stitches that I needed to get to the size that was asked for. So I think they won't mind that it's a bit looser, and it means it's a bit quicker for me. Yeah, so that's the second new cast on, the costume for the theatre. And then we come to the cotton projects, and I've brought my Vortex shawl again, and I continued knitting on it. And I think did I tell you last week that I switched the needles, that I took the long needle that I had in this shawl and put it into the Sierra Shawl, and I used the short needle that I started the shawl on to put the stitches of this shawl on. And these are actually less than 100 stitches. So this should be 96 stitches, which means I have to do another 12 pattern repeats. Still quite a bit. 96 stitches means I have to do 96 times 2 rows. and I have to add in another 96 beads. But if I think about it as 12 pattern repeats, it doesn't sound too bad. And then this shawl will finally be finished after 9 years of being on my needle. This huge, beautiful shawl will finally be done. So if I stick to the plan of doing 6 pattern repeats a week, which is almost a pattern repeat per day, I should finish it within the next 2 weeks. I'll try. I won't promise. If it takes 3 weeks, I don't mind. But the end is really in sight, and I'm really, really happy about it. Still have quite a bit of yarn. Haven't weighed it. I'll weigh it once I'm done, so I know how much yarn I used. So that's the Vortex shawl, and my other cotton project is the Talavera Blanket, which is a crochet along in the Simply Crochet magazine. I started on the 4th part of the pattern, so the pattern has been was divided into 7 pieces and will be released in 7 different magazines. And I already have 4 parts of the pattern. The 5th one comes out this month, and I've not quite finished half the rounds for part 4. So I think I'm on round 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on the 5th round, and it's 11 rounds in part 4. And so this is what it looks like at the moment. And the bit that you can see here is the same kind of pattern that I already did here. And the interesting thing is, when I saw the picture of the pattern, I thought, oh, they look like really nice round noops or whatever. But then I started crocheting, and I got these big flat things, and they didn't look round at all. So I was really confused, but I kept crocheting. And then once you do the next round, that's when they start getting really nice and round. So I almost finished this round. The only problem is that I ran out of yarn, so I'll have to crochet those few stitches when I get home. But I still started the next round somewhere. Here we go. And now you can see, as soon as you put the next round on top, these big flat things suddenly get nice and round. It's so interesting, I think. Yeah, so this is what it looks like now. This is just the start of this round, and then yeah, once I finish the round, all these thingies will be nice and round. So that's the Talavera Blanket, and the other blanket, my other crochet project, is here, and it's really growing big because now I've added the 3rd balls, 150 gram balls in both colors. So this is getting rather heavy to carry around, but it's still so much fun. That the right side up? Yes, it is. So this is the finished tail, and this is half the head. So this is the lower. Oh, I still don't know what it's not the chin, it's the whole. Oh, I should know what the word is. Anyway, so these are the lower teeth, and these are the upper teeth, and this thing here is from its roar, because it's roaring out. And then the way they do in comics, they're these 3 sort of stripes to visualize his roaring. And I'll quickly stand up to show as much as I can on screen. So won't take too long now to finish this guy, and then I have to decide whether or not to add a border around. I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to do that. We'll see how big it is once the dinosaur is finished, and then I'll make a decision. That leads me to the High Sierra Shawl, another Romy pattern. And that's this beautiful modular triangular shawl. And yeah, you already know this lace pattern. And then I finished knitting the stripes that go on top of this part. And then I started knitting the next lace pattern, which is basically the same pattern as the one I did before, but only smaller. So this has, so I think now I'm just knitting one of those motifs. And I knit half the rows already. So this is half the lace pattern. I add the same number of rows again, and then this part will be done, and then I'll go back to knitting stripes. And in the pattern she calls for a set of minis, so you can have each of these lace patterns in a different color, but I'm just doing the 2 colors and I'm loving it this way as well. So that's the High Sierra Shawl, and that brings me to the knit along that we're doing, where we're knitting tiny little socks or big socks, whatever you want to knit. And I finished the tiny socks I was working on last week, and the yarn I used for these socks was leftover yarn from a little baby jacket that I knit out of the book Knit Happy with Self-Striping Yarn. That's the back of the jacket. But what I wanted to show you is the front of the jacket, because I've added buttons. When I showed this as a finished object, it didn't have buttons, and a friend of mine gave me these cute little bunny buttons, and now it's completely finished, and now I have a nice little jacket with socks to go with it. And yeah, so now this is all done, and I'm really, really happy. Yeah, that's it. That's everything I knit and crocheted last week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!